I frequently reflect on the class of walk, which was something I think started for me in second grade, where instead of this highly structured and regulated academic experience, the Waldorf teacher would take the class out to explore the region around the school. And for me, this really exemplified one of the things that I thought was great about Waldorf, which was that the teacher's role was really to cultivate learning from within their students, as opposed to some external rigid expectation. And so we would explore nature. My teacher, Bev Boyer, would often try to notice different things that her students were passionate about and taking an interest in, and then cultivate that interest very naturally. And in nature, there are access to many different things that might not otherwise be covered in the classroom. And I think very fondly on that experience. I think the first time I stepped foot into a Waldorf classroom, I was sort of shocked by this concept of main lesson and how everything was integrated through art. The fact that we were drawing the characters of stories in the history that we were covering, the fact that we had characters for division and multiplication in math class. I think it really struck me and helped sort of form those concepts in my mind in a much more human and impassioned way than might otherwise have happened in a more traditional classroom.
In Waldorf education, instead of learning from a textbook, we kind of create our own textbooks. So the teachers will teach us, and then we will write about what we've learned, we'll draw about what we've learned on just plain sheets of paper, and we'll put it all together so that at the end of that subject block, we have a book of everything we learned.
Creativity was important because I feel like it helped me understand what was going on in the classroom and like internalize what that meant for me. Or like I could use a story, for example. We'll hear a story and it'll have some historical importance or like some sort of like life lesson to it. And maybe it wouldn't be translated, but through like drawing it or doing some sort of project around the story and like having to present it on like a main lesson page, I like learn a lot more from the story. Like I have to think about it.
I loved that art was such a big part of the Waldorf experience. I loved drawing, so making the main lesson books. I loved singing, so the fact that singing art, it was just worked into the curriculum, so you didn't have to go outside to get that. It was just there for me. I really liked how lessons were taught in the form of stories. So main lesson, it didn't feel like you were sitting there going through a textbook. The teacher would be telling us a story, and then we were all just completely engaged. I think because their Waldorf education isn't based on technology, it was a lot more hands-on. I think that set me apart from every other student I've met from every other school. I don't think I've met many students who can say they didn't stare at a screen in grade school. They didn't watch movies when the teachers didn't feel like teaching. For us, we were always engaged with each other and with our teachers. We were always creating. There was a lot of like integration going on. Say if we're learning science, we would learn it, we would draw it, we would sing about it, we would recite poetry about it, we would go outside and we would build it.
Some of the best experiences you have at this school are actually physically building large things with your entire class. There's blocks of time in the year where each morning or each afternoon the whole class will go out into the woods and build these much larger huts in little groups where they can, in the end, hide inside and shelter themselves. Or some classes will build structures. There's a class that built a stone house that's been there for so many years. There's classes that have built sort of jungle gym setups, and I remember my class built a bench at some point. It's the class's way of leaving a mark on the school, and it also, I think, provides a lot of knowledge for the future.
A lot of things we do at Waldorf, it's easy to see like the work that I did with my hands led to this like really physical like main lesson book or like a craft. I think third grade, I remember we did a big project, and it's like, wow, our class built this structure, and like that was our hard work. Now it's like on campus.
I really value having generalist skill sets. I think it's incredibly important in a time of technology development and automation. And drawing that back to Waldorf School, every day we weren't just learning and specializing in one subject. There was artistic creativity integrated into math, which is a crazy concept to anybody who hasn't experienced Waldorf School, but I believe helped me develop holistically as a student. In my job today, I'm asked to sort of context switch between hundreds of different things. One hour I might be working on hiring, another hour I could be managing somebody, another hour I could be talking to an investor. And I think the greatest innovation, the greatest productivity comes at the intersection of different domains and disciplines. And because Waldorf has sort of integrated that into learning from day one, it comes very naturally to me. I think this has made me a stronger leader because I feel so comfortable in the uncertainty and sort of the confluence of so many different disciplines.
The holistic approach to learning that just took all of these different elements into play and married them so nicely. So, you know, the idea that we had eurythmy class, which was so unusual and nothing that anyone I knew had ever heard of before, and certainly not something that, you know, friends from early childhood got to experience. But, you know, to sort of have these different blocks and to learn in that way was a really special thing. And I think that, you know, that really instilled in me a love of beauty and of approaching everything that you do in a really thoughtful and creative and physically attractive way. Just thinking of the way the eurythmy room was set up, you know, it was sort of hung with these beautiful colored drapes and materials and the painting and, you know, just everything that surrounded you was this incredibly beautiful environment. And so, you know, that's what I mean by holistic, that it was every element from the color of the paint in the room to the, you know, to the activity that you were engaged in at any given time. Just every detail was really well thought out and was, you know, exactly appropriate for whatever the activity was that you were trying to do or whatever learning they were trying to instill in you. So that really holistic approach was pretty spectacular to be a part of. I was thinking about how you produce things in a professional environment. A lot of times you're working on a project, or you're, you know, maybe in an academic setting, you're writing a paper, or you're doing something like that, some sort of deliverable that you have to hand over to people. And I think Waldorf just did such a tremendous job of instilling this sense of beauty in everything that you do. And I think, you know, that really has come into play in a huge way for me. I remember sort of printing and reprinting cover pages of things, or, you know, messing around even when I had the content exactly right with the format or the way that this chart looked or the color or the spacing or the size. And I think there's really something to that. I think that when people receive something and there's sort of this physical, you know, beauty to it, that they receive the information in a different way. And I think Waldorf, you know, intuitively teaches you that, but literally teaches you that too. You know, when you're practicing your Ks, you know, you're doing it, you know, in color, and you're doing it, you know, then you're drawing borders around the page of Ks, you know, and you're sort of really digging in deep there in how you present that information. And if you sort of contrast that to a, you know, traditional school in which you have a pencil, a number 2 pencil, and you're writing a bunch of Ks across some lined paper, like it just stays with you differently. You just receive that information differently. So It's kind of a hard thing to articulate, but I think about that a lot. I think I'm more effective at my job because I present information in a way, in sort of a physical, beautiful way. And I think that really goes a long way. It literally helps people digest the content, right? You still need good content, but beyond that, it's sort of next level presentation. And I think that's been true in college and certainly true professionally as well. Sort of a funny point, but has mattered to me, I think, and I think about it often.
If you read articles about the experience of an entrepreneur or a founder, they're constantly tested, they're constantly asked to do different things. And I think the diversity of experience through Waldorf really built a resilience in me that allows me to face challenges and failure with a lot of humility. And maybe it doesn't sound humble to say that directly, but I do feel that I'm very comfortable with failure. I'm very comfortable with the challenges and ups and downs of an entrepreneurial experience. And, I think Waldorf was a big part of that foundation that ultimately helped me to get to one of the most fulfilling professional experiences I could imagine having at 30 years old. We always think about investing in these more rigid skill sets, but what Waldorf does is it builds the foundation to then go out with a much longer lifespan and invest in those every single day and learn from every experience one faces. And so that is how I describe Waldorf to people who haven't heard about it. And it is absolutely something I'll be exploring when I'm a parent in the future.